Hi, my name is Kelly Hansen, and this is my social topics presentation number 3. Antisocial behavior describes any action that is immediately intended to harm someone else. This can be physical, psychological, or emotional harm. This type of behavior is heavily influenced by social issues. These social issues include social artifacts, which are human products that act as catalysts for aggression. The first social issue that influences antisocial behavior is the media. This includes TV shows, movies, the news, even books and music. Adults are exposed to a lot of this, but children are exposed to large amounts of violence in both subtle and obvious ways. This makes them more likely to replicate the violence that they see. Weapons are another social artifact that has an impact. The accessibility to weapons is a huge indicator in a person's likelihood to act aggressively. The more accessible the weapons, the more likely to behave aggressively. Alcohol is another social influence that causes impairment of cognitive processes and reduced self-awareness. This makes you less likely to process a decision that you're doing as something bad. It lowers our inhibitions to actions that are out of our normal self-schema. Lastly, social media is another big catalyst for antisocial behavior. Not only does it cause feelings of isolation, it allows for people to bully people while being hidden behind a screen. It lets us reach people who would not be otherwise accessible. The aggression seen on social media is mostly verbal. While these social influences might not cause the aggressive behavior, it makes it more likely. One behavior that's caused by consuming violent media is the mirroring of certain observed antisocial behavior. We replicate what we see. And those who consume lots of violent media are more likely to act in similar ways in real life. When it comes to weapons, there's a correlation between violent video game usage and an increase in mass shootings and school shootings. This is another form of replication. Frustration and access to weapons mix together and they result in violent reactions, which is shown by the fact that countries with less guns have less gun violence. Alcohol use leads to an increase in the occurrence of sexual violence and other physically aggressive behaviors, and this is due to a decrease in inhibition. Again, alcohol is not the cause of these aggressive behaviors, but it makes it more likely. Since social media allows for anonymity, verbal aggression is more likely in the form of trolling. This is also caused by the lack of accountability. It's possible to reduce these antisocial behaviors. In order to do so, we need to take certain steps. These social influences heavily impact almost all aspects of our lives. The first would be to limit our consumption of violent media, or at least become more aware of it. The article that I chose for this assignment focuses on this step. Taking away the means to commit acts of aggression by reducing access to weapons would also help, especially with younger people. It's harder to commit acts of aggression and acts of antisocial behavior when you don't have the means to do so. Practicing controlled reappraisals instead of acting instantly would also reduce aggression and antisocial behavior. It involves taking a second to think through your reaction and what you're actually doing before you do it. Learning how to manage frustration might be the most important way that we can reduce antisocial behaviors, as we learn that almost all aggression can be traced back to some form of frustration. Before we get into the findings of the research, here is a quick summary of the article that I chose. It addressed the lack of research and interventions for adolescents in media literacy. It was a longitudinal study that consisted of 4 tests over a time period of 30 months. This was the longest study of its kind at the time that it was conducted. It assessed the use of violent media, normative acceptance of aggression, and self-reported aggressive behaviors. These were all measured through questionnaires. Participants attended 5 classes that gave them awareness and strategies to lessen their use of violent media. In these classes and in the intervention, they promoted 2 techniques, the first being critical consumption. This intended to make the students more aware of the violence in the media that they were consuming, and they wanted to increase their negative attitudes towards that violence in the media. The second technique was restricted consuming, which tried to reduce their consumption of violent media by introducing restrictions and self-monitoring. This was done by having the participants keep a journal over a time period of a week and then reflecting on their use of violent media. These classes that made up the intervention were treated like normal classes in their school schedule. The overall result of the study was that all 3 tested items were reduced over time in the experimental group. The use of violent media decreased significantly at the second test time compared to the initial. This was after the intervention, and the result maintained over the entire course of the 30 months. Use of violent media at the time of the second test was a significant predictor of the participants' physical aggression at the time of the third, but not the fourth. So it had an effect, but it wasn't long-lasting. Lastly, there was a significant interaction between aggression at the participants' initial assessment, their violent media usage at the time of the second test, and their normative beliefs at the time of the third assessment. All of these results either supported or partially supported their hypotheses and show that teaching people about the large amount of violence they are consuming, it helps them become more aware of their own behaviors that may be caused by it. While reading this article, I developed a deeper understanding of relational aggression, which involves harming someone's reputation. It was surprising to me how much the participants' violent media consumption actually went down after only 5 sessions. I work with teens in this age group, and it shocked me that the intervention worked as well as it did, which could be due to the fact that the intervention was highly interactive. It was interesting that they incorporated all types of media, such as books and music, because a lot of studies ignore that. Lastly, I learned more ways to reduce antisocial behaviors from media consumption, like restricting use and thinking more critically about what I personally watch and consume. Thank you.